Okay, welcome to the first installment video for the notes in Algebra 2, Section 5.5. And in this section, we're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations. And there's three main techniques that are taught in this section. The first technique is one that's called solving by factoring. So as the name implies, we're going to be factoring a quadratic expression. Okay, we're going to have a quadratic equation. You can see the equal sign there, which makes it an equation. And it's in standard form when the x squared term is up front, the x is in the middle, and your constant number is at the back. And the other part of quadratic equation in standard form is that it must have equal 0 here. If you don't have a 0 on the right-hand side, then part of this technique won't work. Okay, must have 0 on the right-hand side. All right, so we're just going to do example 1 here. We're going to get the equation in standard form, factor it, and then I'll show you what to do after that. Okay, so here we go. We'll distribute to get this thing going. And it doesn't say equal 0, so I'm going to bring the 24 over to the left-hand side. Don't forget to change the sign when you do that. Okay, so we have this in standard form. It's got the quadratic equation, the part, or the quadratic term, this x squared part up front. And then right behind it is the linear part, that negative 6x. The constant follows, and it does say equal 0. So we're ready to go here. And so now I'll teach you how to handle the next part. You need to factor this, and I've actually spent a lot of time in the earlier part of Chapter 5 teaching you this. One of the first things you look for is a greatest common factor. The terms in this all divide by 3, so I'm going to take a 3 out. Once you've got that out, then you're going to break this up into its factors. And most recently, I've taught you what's called the star method. And you take the leading coefficient, let me highlight it here, and the last coefficient, and you multiply them together. So 1 times negative 8 gives negative 8. And I'll write that right above that center part there. And the center term is negative 2, and that goes there. And then the leading coefficient, the 1, goes in both side slots. All right, now what this sets us up to do here is we got to find two numbers that multiply to give negative 8 and add to give negative 2 to finish this off. Multiply to give negative 8 and add to give negative 2. The numbers that multiply to give 8 are 1 and 8, or 2 and 4. And if you take that last pair, you can play with the signs and make it work here. 4 and 2. If you make the 4 negative, you've got it. Those two numbers multiply to give negative 8, and they add to give negative 2. Now, the left-hand side here, that fraction doesn't simplify. If it does, you are required to simplify it. But you just turn it sideways, 1x minus 4. And then you look at the other side, and it's got a 1 over 2. And 1/2 is already simplified also, so there's no simplifying to do. And this becomes 1x plus 2. And we did this last semester. Hopefully you remember how to do it. Okay, so now that we have it factored, I'll teach you the rest of this. And it uses what's called the zero product rule. Now, in the zero product rule, you'll see a product. I'm going to highlight the multiplications that aren't shown here with some red dots. And what we have is 3 things multiplied to give 0. it's got that equal 0 on the right, and that's important. Now, the only way you get three numbers to multiply to give 0 is if at least one of them equals 0. So we're just going to explore now. This is how you do this here. You see if the first one equals 0, and that's patently false, so put a not equal to 0 there. Set up the next one. Maybe that's the one that would equal 0, the middle factor, in which case x would have to equal 4. Or maybe it's the last factor that's equal to 0. You just set all three of these equal to 0 is what you do. And if that's true, then x will equal -2. And there it is. Example 1 is solved. And I'll pick up on the other side in another video for examples 2, 3, 4, and 5.